We are back. It's been a minute. And just in case you missed our last two episodes, inconsistently with the weather that we had in the last 2 weeks, a couple hurricanes floated through this area. We did put those up. They are accessible, so you can go to our YouTube channel and you can see the previous two episodes. And we're sorry we couldn't promote it. Just internet was spotty. A hurricane was here. Everybody was doing kind of promotion and getting their house prepped for what was coming through the Tampa Bay area. So but we're back in a capacity. Preston Jackson, Matt Cooper, Derek Williams. And shit, I'm outside at a Starbucks because I still don't have power in my house. It's still going on day six, no power, no internet. But the show must go on. So, hey, what we would like to jump into is how the weather impacted the high school football season. We um, Number one, we wanted to ensure everybody's safety. Everybody wants to ensure everybody's safety. FHSAA, as the weather was hitting, they had to huddle up and figure out what they were going to do about these number of games that teams were missing. So we want to start with that. So I'm just going to open the floor up um, to Matt and Derek. And the number one piece of news that came out yesterday was the FHSAA has extended the 2024 season by a week. So now we have 12 total weeks, games that needed to be made up that were canceled because of the storm. They'll be made up in week 12, and there'll be no break before the playoffs start. So teams will go from week 12 right into the playoffs. So that's kind of big. I would say never been done before, at least since we've been covering. And it was kind of a big move by the FHSAA, but not sure what else they could have done. So, fellas, with that note, how do you like the move? Should they maybe have just canceled those games and had the week off before the playoffs? Do you like them going right into the playoffs? Derek, I'll let you start, man. Rock out.
Well, yeah, the later season games tend to be the ones within your district, so you've got to play them really because those are kind of the most important games. So it's how you fix it or modify it somehow. Adding the week on. I think it begs for a bigger question: how to fix it or solutions to it. Um, is adding or reducing schedule down to 8 games, but then creating a multi-layer playoff or postseason, even for non-playoff teams. I mean, could we have an 8-week schedule with 2 extra games? Assuming the weather holds out. I'm not sure what the answer is, but you've got to get those district games played, and it's hard to create a tiered playoff system if you've got 2 teams within a district that didn't get a chance to play each other. So I'm not sure. I don't know what the answer is. I know the season starts early. The kids get into school. They start school, and it's like that first week is the first game, and then we roll these games all the way out through December. I'm not sure how much room there is to expand that. I don't know. So I don't know if it's expanding or if it's maybe reducing games down to 8 and maybe having 2 additional, rounds even for teams that are not playoff teams that they can have like a after the fact after the season schedule that kind of comes together. I don't know. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, so I mean, it's definitely unfortunate. We had 2 hurricanes back to back. October 10th, they had to cancel all the games. Just a couple district games, like you mentioned. East Bay, they played Tampa Bay Tech as a district game. Jesuit, they're playing Middleton, that's a district game. So they pushed all the games to November 7th, so they can remake it. So the question is like they're not going to get that week break that they typically would have gotten to kind of rest up, kind of watch film and start preparing for the playoffs. Um, but practice makes perfect. So adding that extra game in there, for one, I do think it's important because this is towards the end of the season. Some of the players aren't, some of the teams, like they've either gained momentum or maybe lost momentum. So this is a chance for some of these maybe teams that you wouldn't have thought would win. Possibly they get a W and it brings them higher in the rankings and it helps them get to the playoffs. And on the same token, these teams might need to take the break and rest it up. But when I'm looking at some of these games too, it looks like some of these higher caliber teams are playing some of the lower caliber teams. And so this can be more of like a warm up for some of these teams to win. Armwood, they're playing Sickles. Sickles, they took a loss to, for example, to Tembe Tech. I believe it was like 46-6. So, that's almost like a warm up game for Armwood to kind of prepare, get some of their plays in and get those guys ready for the playoffs. Tech, they're playing East Bay. East Bay, that could be a game. East Bay's been doing very well the last half of the season, and maybe they upset Tech. You never know. So it's going to be exciting to watch that last week. It's November 7th. These teams are going to have a chance to play some of these other teams for the district to try to take a W in that. But yeah, I'm excited to see how the season ends out. We're kind of watching the rankings on Max Prep, seeing how that's going. What do you guys think? What would be best in your opinion, Preston?
Well, to blend both of your arguments together, is that one thing that we probably negated, and you mentioned something. You started hitting on the rankings, is that 10th game of the season could be massive with teams earning a playoff spot. There could be bubble teams that need that 10th game of the season that can move up into an 8th or 7th seed in the playoffs. And also with teams who are sitting 3rd or 4th seed, they can end up as a 2 or 1 seed. So because the rankings are so heavily involved with playoff seeding, that 10th game or not having that 10th game could be crucial. Yeah. It could be crucial. So I think that, it matters.
So just to touch back on there, I just pulled up the 5A District 8, which is East Bay, Tempe Tech, Spoto, and Lato. And right now, according to Max Preps, East Bay does have the lead. They're the number 1 team above Tempe Tech in that ranking. So they need that game. It was unfortunately canceled because of the storm, but that's a way for Tempe Tech. They have probably been the district champs these last couple of years. They definitely want to play at East Bay. That's a district game. It's important for them to get that and try to get become the district champs as well. So it's almost like a little championship within before the playoffs. But I'm not sure exactly how the playoffs work. Do the top teams of all the districts go, or how do they?
So your playoffs are 32 teams in each classification outside the rural classification, which is only 16. All right. Every district champion goes. So you'll get 8 teams in each region. You have 4 different regions. Okay. 8 teams in each region. And then you have 4 district champions in your region, and then 4 at large or wild cards. This is called them at large. All right. So, but those 8 teams, the 4 district champs plus the 4 at large, they can be seeded however the rankings seed them. So the top 4 teams are not necessarily the district champs. They can be, but not necessarily. So however those 4 district champs and ever at large, however they line up in the rankings is how they're going to be seeded. So that's why those games are massive, because your 9th and 10th game of the season could place you in an advantageous or at a disadvantage in the playoffs. So it's big. They got to have that.
So what could you, if speaking of East Bay and Tempe Tech, East Bay is ranked, they're 1-0 in their district, and same thing with Tempe Tech. They're both 1-0. Spoto and Lato are 0-1. What would happen if an East Bay were to beat Tempe Tech?
It would be, then you would need, who did East Bay play? They played Lato already?
Yep. And they played Spoto.
You would need Spoto to beat East Bay. You would need Spoto to beat East Bay, right? Okay, because what you want to happen is they end up at 2-2, and then you possibly have a 2-way tie. Okay, now if you have a two-way tie, then I think the higher rated team, according to the rankings, goes.
So East Bay will play Spoto on the 25th, and then they'll go and play Tempe Tech. So they have their 2 district games, the last 2 games of the season for them.
Correct. So you get head-to-head and then higher ranking. So they would need to create a 2-way tie. Better yet, they just need to win. Put it that way. All right. But if it's a 2-way tie, the higher seed will go. And
So looking at the rankings right now, According to Max Preps in the Tampa Bay area, you have Armwood number one. They're still 6-0. Then number 2 is Tampa Bay Tech. Number 3, you got Jesuit. 4 is Wiregrass. Wiregrass is 6-0. Congrats to Wiregrass. You have Gaither at 5, Berkeley Prep at 6, Durant is at 7. Then they have Newsom, Plant City, and Sumner. So there's your top 10 according to Max Preps.
That's pretty strong. They're crediting Sumner for having the strength of schedule. Sumner has played a really good team. Is Sumner 500? I believe they're maybe 3-3, somewhere around in there.
That's a good question.
I don't have access to my computer. I'm working on my phone, but I believe Sumner is somewhere around 500.
Yeah, and they do credit. I think they do weight the strength of schedule. I mean, you take a team like Cocoa.
Absolutely.
I mean, a Cocoa team is 3-3 this year, and they're going to be they're way up.
Well, Sumner says they're 3-4. They actually lost to Bartram Trail, Armwood, and they lost to Plant City, and they lost to Lakeland.
Yes, that sounds about right.
We're going to play Hillsborough on October 10th, which that'll be postponed to November 7th. We mentioned, and then their wins though they beat Wharton 33-8. They beat Newsom 17-14. Well, that's a big game beating Newsom. That was also a district game for them. Sumner. So then they beat Plant. We remember that game, the 19-13 game. They scored in the last minute, and that those are their W's. So. They put Sumner at number 10 based off the strength of the schedule.
So the formula, and they will never tell folks the formula. I wouldn't tell anybody either, because then coaches could they would try their best to piece together a schedule that fits the formula, right? Right, so they can almost manipulate how the result would be. However, the formula starts with obviously your wins and losses, and then your strength of schedule. Okay, so your strength of schedule plays a huge part of it, and then your opponent's strength of schedule, and then your opponent's strength of schedule. Mm-hmm. So all that plays a factor. So even though Sumner's a 3-4 team, look who they lost to. They lost to Lakeland. They lost to Plant City. They lost to
Armwood.
Help me out here. Armwood and Bartram Trail. I would venture to say, without looking at it on my computer, all those teams are above 500 teams. And shoot, I believe at least two of those 4 are top 5 teams.
And so right.
And then they have quality. They got quality win versus Plant. And remember now, even though Plant is under 500, Plant schedule, they have their strength of schedule. Mm-hmm. Remember what I said? They take the opponent's strength of schedule also. And then they have a quality win versus Newsom. And Newsom is above 500. So I can see why Sumner is a top 10 team right now.
Yep. Plant, every team that you mentioned is a top 10 team. Plant was ranked at number 11 according to Max Preps. It's looking pretty good. Sumner, their district, they got Plant City, Sumner, Newsom, Strawberry Crest, Alonzo. They'll play Strawberry Crest and Alonzo those last 2 games of the season, and they're going to fight Plant City for that district championship spot. So it's going to get fun. You know, these last couple games, like Derek mentioned, is going to be super important for all these teams. You know, we looked at a lot of these other teams like Armwood and even Tech, and we noticed that it seemed like their harder games were that first half of the season. But sometimes importancy isn't necessarily harder, you know. And so when they're doing these districts, you have to win out your district. You know, you can beat every other team, but if you don't do well in your district, then it can force you out of the playoffs.
Yeah. Hey, winning the district guarantees you a spot.
So it's pretty exciting to see. Is there any team that you've been watching that's really excited you guys? How about you, Derek?
I've been cutting trees and it's not been a good week here, but without having the schedule in front of me right now, we talked, a little bit about how Tech was going to end the season. What we expected out of some of the powerhouses, some of the teams in the area that didn't have a great win-loss record last year, that's got good schedules, that are making a big run. So it's hard to say. after this week, I think it'll, we'll see what happens after this week. But
I can see Tech doing work, getting through this district. They're going to play Leto, like we talked about. They beat Spoto 42-7. And that's where Tampa Bay Tech starts turning it up. They get in the playoffs. They start upsetting everybody. They're a great team. I know they're going to have Santonio Isaac back, a great wide receiver, and that's when they start really getting that momentum in the playoffs. So I'd like to see how far they go. They're in the they are in 5A this year. So I know that some of these districts have changed up this past year. So it'd be nice to see Tampa Bay Tech, see how far they go. Obviously, Armwood, we've all been watching them. They've been just an incredible team this year, 6-0. They're most likely going to make a nice little run for it as well. Um, I'm actually surprised to see even Berkeley Prep. I know they took in a couple of losses, but they still got them in the ranks at number 6. And also, guys, if you guys don't agree with Max Prep's rankings, make sure you guys post below who you think should be in this top 10. It's been a very competitive season. I thought they've done a great job as far as the rankings, but also the scheduling. The teams that have done well these last couple of years have really strengthened their schedule up. So make sure you guys post below in the comments who you think should be that top 10 team, and we'll make sure we give them a shout out. You guys, so we always like to hear your feedback.
I, I want to slightly go back, Derek, and I think we talked about this slightly off camera, but years ago, I believe our area was traditionally the Tampa Bay area. Florida is impacted heavily at the start of the season by the weather. Okay, and it may not necessarily be an actual hurricane, but we get so much rain at the start of fall, and usually the running joke is, well, it's football season when all the rain comes, right? So that's the running joke. However, it's not necessarily the rain and or the lightning. It becomes the field conditions. Okay. So the field conditions become unplayable to where teams are forced to postpone games or cancel games. It was a year, I want to say about 6, 7 years ago, where it was crazy. Like the first 2 weeks, the actual weeks of the season were pushed back and or canceled games. So I want to give credit where credit is due. Doug Pugh, who was a longtime BCP contributor, we were riding to Gainesville on a media advisory board meeting. And Doug came up with the idea. It was like, yo, we need to just build in actual bye weeks, 2 bye weeks, one after game 5 and one after game 12. The whole state is on a bye. Okay. The whole state is on a bye after week 5, and the whole state is on a bye after week 11 for this purpose. In case there needs to be makeup games, there's already a week built in, whether it's in the middle of the season or at the end of the season. And I was like, yo, bro, that's a dope idea. Now, we somewhat presented it on the whim to that everybody at the table, and it was kind of accepted and not accepted. It's hard for change, and you got a lot of folks in there who are, it could take some time for the weigh on them. But the point is, I don't know the logistics about it, but if you already have weeks built in, you can make up, this right here becomes a non-issue because we already know that we can do it, right? Now, I don't know how that impacts busing. I don't know how that impacts the financial side. I don't know how that impacts scheduling. I don't know any of the logistics. But if we have an idea like that, then I think you can work back from it, right? You can work back and say, this is how we work this out. This is how we work this out. And this is how we work this out. But it's already built into the season. So everybody's off at week 6, the whole state. Everybody's off unless you need that makeup week. And then week 12, everybody's off unless you need that makeup week. And that was Doug Pugh's idea, and I loved it. I backed it. There were some coaches in there that they saw it, they liked it. It's hard to change until you get to a situation like this, and you're like, shoot, that was a good idea.
Yeah.
The problem,
You know what I mean?
So the problem, I mean, what happens though is like if you're going to have a 10-game season, if you're just like, all right, we're going to have 10 games, and you're going to add 2 weeks to it, now you're in the 12 weeks. So you got 3 months. So now if you're starting September, October, like you're starting to push into a December into the season. And then now that, the first week of December that used to, I mean, I think that's when the championships were. Now you're starting to encroach on that, the Christmas break. So now you're like, all right, do you start the season earlier? I mean, it's just like, what can you do? I mean, I
Yeah.
always found it
Yep.
weird, like kids show up to school and it's like, they first day of school, it's like, hey, we got a football game Friday night. So that strains it on the start. And then you've got the Christmas break that strains it on the back end. So then you got to
Yep.
ask yourself, if you're going to go 10 games and have it with 2 buys, that's 12 weeks of regular season. And then you're looking at 4 rounds. You're talking about 4 months of football. And, it presents now that's why I say, do you take an approach like, all right, we're going to go to an 8-game schedule, right? We're going to hyper focus on the district play, but then we're going to also create 2 additional games after the season for non-playoff teams, and you could somehow create some sort of something around that, and then the playoff teams get into where they get into their playoff schedules, and then they extend their games out. So then instead of a state championship team playing 15 games over the course of a year, 14, 15 games, it would be 13 games. But then you're so I don't know. It's a
So, admittedly, Derek, you bring up a good argument. My only pushback to that would be, okay, well, right now, if you're a third round team, you're practicing during Thanksgiving week,
Mhm.
right? You're practicing during Thanksgiving week. You're playing that Friday after
Yep.
Thanksgiving, right? Baseball, if you're in a baseball state championship, you're playing in the state championship after the school year's done. I believe there's the last 2 rounds of the state championship that are after the school year ends, right? So what if we did push up until Christmas?
Well,
It happens.
I
We're,
I would recommend ending the season, just because of the heat. Maybe start the year in late September or early October, and then you finish
mhm.
your regular season right at the break. And then when you get back from the Christmas break, you've got your playoff, rounds going out in January. So that
just in the space of sports, just in the space, nothing academically, so nothing actually in the school building. Athletics never stop. Like, no holiday is there a break with athletics. No holiday, not Thanksgiving, not Christmas, not Easter. There are tournaments. There's something going on all the time on every freaking holiday. So as we push back, I understand your point saying, hey, we're going to push into Christmas. People are trying to plan for Christmas break. Yeah, that happens, but it's almost like if you're planning to be on the 5th week of the season, you need to plan your Christmas break and see if you're in that 5th week of the season first. If you're not playing the state championship game, then you're good. But if you're going to play, you need to hold on and see if you win that state championship game before you fly out to Ontario. So, I mean, and
And sports
again, I
parents are
say that
used to
tongue in
that.
cheek because I don't know all the playing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
And
athletics,
Little
sports
League,
parents are
they're
used to that.
playing. They
Yo,
got that's when their tournaments are, is weekend Labor Day tournaments, and you know Thanksgiving
bingo.
tournaments and
Easter
Christmas
tournaments,
tournament.
Thanksgiving tournaments,
You
all
know,
sports,
and
right?
what a gift around the holidays. You get to play a game. Friday night, you got all your family in town. Everybody comes back. You get to shine under the lights for them. So I definitely understand both of you guys' argument on that. Um,
Yeah, and that's a good argument by Derek too. I get it. A 13 game season versus a 15 game season. Uh, and remember now, we can't. You take away those 2 games, Derek, and you're talking about. Also talking about funds, right? Because whatever those gates bring in, especially for a county like Hillsborough County, the centralized funding, those funds matter. They can't lose that gate, no matter how minute it is. They want all that money that comes in from the concessions and the gate and that parking, everything
well
else.
you
So they don't want to lose in those two
Well, you
games.
could play the 10 games, but the actual regular season would be focused on the 8 games, which would capture your district. And then a
Mm-hmm.
team that would have for example, let's say a team goes 1-9, right? Well, their season ends at game 10, but potentially instead of 1-9, let's say they were 1-7, and the season ends at 8 games, then they would still have 2 additional games, but that would only involve non-playoff teams. And then the playoff teams would now get into their additional games that would be in a playoff structure. So you wouldn't be missing games necessarily for the
Mm-hmm.
for the for the teams that would play 8 games. They're still going to have maybe 2 rounds of non-playoff additional games, but the playoff teams would not be reduced from 15 down to 13 because they would start playoffs at that week 8. I don't know. Just I just think I don't.
Great
Hey
point.
Matt, hey Matt, hey
Yeah.
Matt. Do your comment below thing. Hey, if you like this idea,
Yeah.
comment below.
No, hey,
If
absolutely.
you
If
got
you
a better
guys want to
idea,
see
comment
games
below.
during the Christmas holiday or Thanksgiving holiday, comment below, yes or no. We want to know your thoughts. But so as you guys are talking, I'm looking and I just couldn't help. But Jefferson, I'm so proud of those boys, man. They are 7-0 right now. And to be honest with you, they could just go the whole season. So their next game, they're actually off this weekend. So we know they're going to be 7-0 for the next week at least. Following week, they play King. King, I think they're going to beat King. So now you go 8-0. And then they remake their game against Chamberlain that they missed on October 10th. They'll have that November 7th. So all of a sudden, you have Jefferson 9-0 this year. I thought that was pretty cool. So shout out to Jefferson. Hopefully they keep balling. I know it's kind of off topic, but when I see these teams standing out, I couldn't help myself to throw that out there for those guys.
You're
It's been
good,
a
man.
while
Shout them
since
out.
they've had
Shout them out.
the
They deserve it.
recognition, and just some of their players. Obviously, we know we talked a lot about their quarterback, Jack Cunningham, 22 touchdown passes. Uh, they have a defensive lineman, Jeremy Johnson, 11 and a half sacks for the season. Uh, their junior running back, Ronald Dubose, 16 touchdowns for the season. I mean, there's some receiving yards. Naled Jones, that must be Jack Cunningham's favorite target. He's at 114 yards per game. These guys are balling this year, and it's actually really. And same thing with Ronald Dubose, the running back. We just talked about him, 173 yards per game. These guys are really doing work. I know some people might, the lack of schedule, but here's the thing. Every team, doesn't matter how big or small the organization is, they take football seriously. They're working hard. It's like they say, any given Sunday, any given Friday, any of these teams could have beat Jefferson, and Jefferson has stood strong this whole season. So congrats to Jefferson. I believe that they're going to go 9-0, and I'm excited to see how far they go into their playoffs.
Hey, Derek cut some film on one of the linemen, and he
Mm-hmm.
sent it to me. He's like, yo, look at this lineman. And I went to look at the lineman at Jefferson, and you look at all five across the board. They're massive. They have a really big and athletic offensive line. And it all starts up front. If you got a good quarterback and a decent offensive line, you can win a lot of football games. Their offensive line is legit.
And still,
Okay.
yeah,
Don't.
yeah, their record is not because of their schedule. Their record is because of their players,
Mm-hmm.
and they are a talented group. And yeah, there's no doubt that offense is potent. They've got kids at all the skill positions, the quarterbacks throwing around. They got a big line. So no, they're a quality team, and yeah, we'll see how they finish out the year.
Any last words, fellas, before we sign out?
Just if you know anybody in the Tampa area, make sure you're reaching out to them, see if they need any help. A lot of people still without power, a lot of players, their homes possibly destroyed through the hurricane. So it's definitely a devastating time. Although we love football, we want to talk about it, we definitely want to, give a shout out to all the people, all the parents, all the fans, all the kids, anybody that's gone through any of this devastation with this last hurricane. It's definitely been rough. One of the worst hurricanes I've seen in my 40 years of life. So we definitely pray for all the different families, and we hope you guys can bounce back and use football as a way to, bring some happiness and joy to your life.
Well said.
Hey, if you want to be a guest, players, coaches, interesting personalities, you want to be a guest on the show, comment
We
below.
want to hear from you. You guys take care. We'll see you soon.
Yep. See you guys.
Bye.